as you'll have seen, Alpha begins on the 2nd of October. And if you've never done it, Alpha is an amazing opportunity to come and explore the big questions in life. Why am I here? Do I have purpose? Is there meaning? And so on. And if you've... it's a great place to invite friends. Actually, I think the youth are often start their youth alpha at this very moment. But it's a great opportunity to bring friends. The format of the evening is doors open at 7. We have a meal till about 8. You can arrive at any point during then. Then a hard start at 8. We watch a film and then we have a discussion. And the idea is that it's a chance to ask any of the questions that you might not get a chance to ask anywhere else. And then later that week, we're celebrating our 5th birthday on the 6th of October. We are 5 years old. Yeah, I think that deserves a round of applause. And to come along, bring friends, it's going to be a great Sunday. But also, in the week leading up to that, you might have seen in the entrance hall, we're going to be doing a week of 24/7 prayer, where basically we make the chapel open 24/7. You can come, you can grab an hour-long slot, or longer if you prefer, and you can pray for the world, for the nation, but also HTBB, and for the next 5 years. Outside, you can sign up, you can get your slot, and if an hour seems a little bit intimidating of length of time to pray, don't worry, because there's a team and they're going to be decorating the space and giving loads of, building lots of things that will help you to pray for that time. So that's a great opportunity to invest in the future of the church. When I was 16, I had to do a work experience placement for 1 week. And I was really excited because I managed to get a placement in a publishing office, quite a prestigious publishing office, but I'd never been in a publishing office. I'd never really been in any kind of office, if I'm honest. And so I didn't really know what I was stepping into. But the one thing I did know was that it was important to wear a suit. And as I didn't have a suit, I went to Matalan, which is like a cheap discount store, and I went and I searched the whole store, and I was really pleased because I managed to find this stunning beige suit. Had quite a wide collar, was a little bit baggy, but I thought it looked perfect. And so for the first day of my work experience, I turned up to the office, sat in reception, and was greeted by my new boss wearing this. And you have to kind of feel a bit sorry for the guy, really. It must have been quite confusing for him to see somebody arrive wearing that suit. He maybe thought perhaps he's going on safari afterwards, or maybe he's got a job at the Majestic Hotel as a porter, but if so, where's his hat? In no sense was that a suit that you would wear in that office. And the thing is, no one said anything. Well, not to my face. I'm sure when I left the room, they could speak of little else. But no one said anything to me. No one said, not in the 100-year history of this office has anyone wore a beige suit, let alone a beige suit that looks like that. And so for 5 days, I went to work, went to meetings, met clients in my beige suit. Now, at the end of the week, I thought the placement had gone quite well. And so I thought part of that must have been down to my suit. That suit gave me great confidence. It became my lucky suit. When I wore that, things worked out well. I wore it to university interviews, job interviews. Even when I asked Kate's dad if I could marry her, I was wearing that suit. And the confidence must have caught on because Kate matchmade 2 of our friends, her flatmate and my flatmate. And so for their first date, we went on a double date. So I got ready, I came down to the kitchen, and my friend Luke had bought a beige suit. Here we are on his first ever date. I thought we looked hot. Everyone else wondered why Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito from the film Twins had made an appearance on the town. And for Luke, on his first date with Anna, it worked. He married her. It must have worked. They came as part of the original team, helped plant this church. This church owes its existence, in part, down to that beige suit. That suit gave me great confidence. And now here's the thing. I look back now, and I shudder to think of the places that I wore that suit. I shudder to think of the people I met wearing that suit. But at the time, I thought all this goodness was coming into my life because of my beige suit. Now looking back, I realized that the goodness that came into my life was coming not because of that suit, but in spite of that suit. Now, the thing is, I wonder, what are the things that we put our trust and confidence in? What are the things that we dress ourselves up in, thinking that when we're wearing this, when we're projecting this, then people will give us their approval, or maybe even God will give us his approval? Because I think there are many things that we sort of put on, that we wear, that we think it's because of this that God likes me, or God is blessing me. And actually, what we discover is that God's blessing is at work in our life, not because of those things, but in spite of those things. Our reading for this morning comes from the book of Genesis chapter 27. And you may remember we looked at this story a little while ago, the beginning of this story. It's a story of a rather dysfunctional family. And the story revolves around a guy called Jacob deceiving his father Isaac. The family, there's a mother and a father, Isaac and Rebekah. They have twin sons, Esau and Jacob. And the problem is that the father, Isaac, he has a favorite son, and his favorite is Esau. Whereas mother, Rebekah, she has a favorite son, which is Jacob. Right? They hadn't done the parenting course, evidently. And so the scene is set with this favoritism for our soap opera. So let's read. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called Esau, his older son, and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he answered. Isaac said, "I am now an old man, and I don't know the day of my death. Now then, get your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare me the kind of tasty food I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may give you my blessing before I die." Now, it's worth just pausing here for a moment just to talk about this central idea of blessing, because this is a blessing that Isaac is going to give and both of his sons want. It's going to be given by the laying on of hands and the speaking of certain words. Now, sometimes the significance of this can pass us by, because, we live in a time where, words are quite cheap, aren't they? Do you remember when handphones first came out, and, to send a text, it cost you, for a start, it cost you 10 cents. That's quite a lot. And you only had 160 characters. And so every word, you were like, can I shorten this? Spaces? I don't need spaces. They can go. Every word was carefully considered. Now we live in the world of WhatsApp, and you get 10 billion messages a day just to your family chat group. We forget that words have significance. Words can make or break you. A word of encouragement, a word of criticism can enter you and shape you. And in an offhand comment can shape you, how much more the words of a blessing from a father in a climactic moment like this, at a deathbed scene. Words can change us, but especially this is a blessing. And in particular, it's the blessing of the firstborn. Now, the story is set in a patriarchal society, and in that society, the inheritance, most of the inheritance, went to the firstborn son. So not the firstborn daughter, not the youngest sons, the firstborn son. He got the lion's share of the inheritance, financially, socially, and spiritually. And what that meant in practice is that the fathers would sort of dote on their eldest son, because that was your legacy. That was your legacy. That was your future. And basically all the others got ignored by comparison. Now, you don't need to be a qualified therapist to see that this is going to start to cause problems. In fact, this favoritism poisons the whole family. In fact, this favoritism carries on generations afterwards. They keep replicating this problem. Now, all of his life, Isaac has informally given Esau his blessing. And now he wants to formally give it. But Jacob wants it. Jacob wants it. And in fact, We all want it. We all want this kind of blessing. We all want the most important person in our lives to look at us and say, you are valuable to me. You are special to me. I love you. We all want to be uniquely loved by someone who is uniquely valuable. We don't just want general love from general people. We want to be a value. Like, you can watch all the Netflix gurus you like who say don't find your self-worth in other people or in what you do. Like, you can't find your self-worth in yourself. Like, you can't bless yourself. You need a good person to tell you that you are good to feel good. You need a smart person to tell you that you're smart to feel smart. We all long for this kind of blessing, for our Father in heaven to look at us and say, you're loved. And what we see next is a picture of the way that we're often tempted to try and get it. So verse 5 says this, now Rebekah was listening as Isaac spoke to her son Esau. When Esau left for the open country to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, look, I overheard your father say to your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare some tasty food to eat, so that I might give you my blessing in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen carefully and do exactly what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, so that I can prepare some tasty food for your father, just the way he likes it. Then take it to your father to eat, so he may give you his blessing. Basically, she's like, I've got a cunning plan. Let's deceive your poor old blind father, steal your brother's inheritance. It's basically a hostile takeover of the family business. This is like Tiger Mum to the max at the moment. And so Jacob says, but my brother Esau is a hairy man, while I am smooth by skin. What if my father touches me? I would appear to be tricking him. Well, yes, you would appear to be tricking him, because that's what you're doing. I would appear to be tricking him and bring down a curse on myself rather than a blessing. His mother said, my son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say. Go and get it for me. So he went and got them and brought them to his mother. She prepared the tasty food just the way his father liked it. Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and she put them on her younger son. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skins. There she handed to her son the tasty food and the bread she had made. She puts this big oversized coat on him. She puts like these big hairy wigs on him. I'm kind of thinking he looks like Chewbacca. And he goes to his father and he says, my father. Yes, my son, he answered. Who is it? Jacob said, I am Esau, your firstborn. Liar, absolute liar. I have done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you might give me your blessing. Straight to the chase, I'm here for the blessing. Isaac asked his son, how did you find it so quickly, my son? The Lord your God gave me success, he replied. If you're going to lie, make it kind of sound spiritual and people less suspecting. Then Isaac said to Jacob, come near so that I can touch you, my son, to know whether you really are my son Esau or not. Jacob went close to his father, who touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like that of his brother. So he blessed him. Are you really my son? You got to think, I'm about to bless. Hang on a sec. Are you really my son Esau, he asked. I am, he replied. Then he said, my son, bring me some of the game to eat so that I might give you my blessing. Jacob brought it to him and he ate and he drank and gave him some wine and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, come here, my son, and kiss him. It's like one last test. I'm going to see if you smell. So he went to him and he kissed him. And Isaac caught the smell of his clothes and he blessed him. And he said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you heaven's dew and earth's riches. May the abundance of grain and new wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be the Lord over your brother, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed and those who bless you be blessed. I mean, we all want that kind of blessing. After Isaac finished blessing him and Jacob had scarcely left his father's presence, his brother Esau came in from the hunting. He too prepared some tasty food and brought it to his father. Then he said to him, my father, sit up and eat some of my game so you may give me your blessing. His father Isaac asked him, who are you? I'm your son, he answered, your firstborn, Esau. Isaac trembled violently and said, "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." This story is a very scary picture of how we try and get blessing in our lives. It's a deeply revealing picture of how we hunt after blessings, because all of us are tempted to be like Jacob and to be like Rebecca. Like Jacob, we have this idea that we need to dress up like someone else. We need to pretend to be somebody else to get others' approval. We read this in verse 19. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I've done as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game, so that you may give me your blessing." Now, you might think this is a bit unlikely, but people literally do this. Last week was a great week for an American guy called Adam Litwin. Last week, Adam Litwin finally graduated as a doctor. But also, last week also marked another achievement. It was the 20th anniversary of when he was originally arrested and imprisoned for impersonating a doctor. In 1999, he'd been visiting a medical library and someone mistook him for a trainee doctor. And so he thought, "Oh, I'll put this white coat on." And he just went along for it. And for about a month, he followed doctors on their rounds, visiting patients. And people asked him why he did it. And he said this: "Have you ever wanted something so badly in your life and you knew you were never going to get it? What would it be like? What would it feel like to be that person, even for just one day?" Fortunately, now he knows it legitimately and he's qualified. Now, as silly as it seems, we're all tempted to behave like this. Like Jacob, we're tempted to dress up before we come to God. To dress up, to put on a costume before we come to him. It's a bit like, we think to come to God, we have to, maybe it's the coat of performance. Yeah, I put the coat of performance on and I feel like I can do anything because you can't come to God unless you're performing well and you're doing all the things that you need to do. But also maybe it's respectability as well. Got to put the coat of respectability on. You can't have any rough edges, no flaws, nothing that would maybe show him up. Or maybe it's I've got a wedding dress here. Maybe it's purity. That's not going to fit. That's not symbolic. Hopefully, you've got to be morally pure. That you come to God and you can't have any temptations, and you've got to have a clean slate before you come to Him. Or maybe it's like academic robes. I'm going to put this on, and I've even got to. Because when you come to God, you've got to think the right things, you've got to say the right words in the right order, you can't have any doubts. Or maybe it's strength. I've got my wife's gym wear here. It's quite hard to get it on. Winning isn't everything, but wanting to is. Good motto for your life, because you can't come to God unless you're strong. God helps those who help themselves, things like that. And we put all these costumes on, and we think that once we've got them on, only then will we get people's approval. Only then will God like us and bless us. Jacob says this to his father. Jacob went close to his father Isaac and he touched him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him, for his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he proceeded to bless him. "Are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "I am," he replied. This is the lie that Jacob believed, that for God to bless him, he could not be himself. That for God to bless him, for God to like him, he had to pretend to be someone else. And the problem is that when the blessing does come, it kind of falls flat. I experience this quite often, fairly regularly. People thank me for my worship leading. Because they think I'm Stu, because we look the same, apparently. And as encouraging as it is to be thanked for my spirit-led, musically gifted worship leading, the encouragement doesn't really go in because I know it's not meant for me. That's the problem with dressing up, is that when the blessing does come, it kind of feels hollow. Put yourself in Jacob's shoes. This is the moment he's longed for his entire life. His entire life, he's longed for his father to look at him with that look of love, that joyful expression. All his life, he's longed to hear those words from his father's lip, that his father approves of him. And it must have been so bitter to hear those words, to get that look and know that it wasn't for him. To be so close and yet so far. But this is what happens to us when we project a persona. Even when the encouragement comes, it doesn't work. Because we think, do you know what, if you really knew me, if you really knew what I was like, then you wouldn't be saying those things. This is the problem. His mother said to him, "My son, let the curse fall on me. Just do what I say and get them for me." In fact, sometimes the blessing almost feels like a curse. The blessing for Jacob was to be leader of the family, to inherit the homeland, and instead he's driven away from family and loses everything. In fact, he never sees his mother again. When we dress up, even when the blessing comes, it doesn't satisfy that ache. What are the things that you think you need to dress up in order for God to bless you? What are the things you think you need to wear, like Jacob, for God to like you? For the Father to look at you and say, "I love you." Now, fortunately, the story doesn't finish there. But before we get to the end, as well as being like Jacob, we are also like Rebekah. His story reveals how we are all tempted to not just dress ourselves up, but to dress other people up, to make them acceptable to us and to make them acceptable to God. Now, I mean, partly that's part of a mother's job description, is to dress their kids up. Like, I know my wife loves it. My mum loved it. Here's a photo of me being dressed up as a kid who would know how to behave at his cousin's wedding, which apparently I did not. In verse 15 and 16, we read, "Then Rebekah took the best clothes of Esau, her older son, which she had in the house, and she put them on her younger son Jacob. She also covered his hands and the smooth part of his neck with the goat skin." This was like the first ever cosplay party. And I think it can be a bit like this. And he's, "Oh, Kenneth, come and help me." Let's give a round of applause for Kenneth. Yeah, Ken's going to come up, and I've got another rack of clothes for Kenneth. Because for Kenneth to get my approval, he needs to perform. Come on, Kenneth, put it on. He needs to perform. He needs to do things the way I like. But he also needs to be respectable. He needs to know how to be around me. He needs to show me the honor that I'm due if he wants my approval. He needs to be morally pure. Will that go over? No, it doesn't fit either. Obviously, you've got to be morally pure in absolutely every way. Well, not always, but just the ways that I bother me. Okay, he's got to put the academic robes on because he's got to think exactly like me if he wants my blessing. And here's a sports jacket as well. You put that on because I need you to be strong. I'm not going to approve of you if you can't carry your own weight. So what you end up is with two very strange costumed people speaking costume to costume, never really knowing one another. Like Isaac, unable to recognize his own son. Thank you, Kenneth. You can keep the clothes. The end result is not a place that we want to be. Rebekah thinks that the only way for Jacob to get the blessing that God has promised before he was born that he was going to bless him, but she thinks that the only way he can be blessed by God is to be someone else, to pretend to be somebody that he's not. And this is such a temptation. I know it is for me. So often I've not shared the good news of Jesus because I thought somebody needs to be something else before they can come to know God. Or I've not invited them to Alpha because I think they need to become something different to then come and experience the blessing of God. But the good news is God is not like that. See, the story finishes in a pretty hopeless situation. Esau is taken over by anger, wants to kill his brother. Jacob, therefore, has to run away. Rebekah never sees him again. And Isaac is left trembling in bewilderment. So, what's the moral of the story? Well, you could say one moral of the story is don't mess your kids up. Or make sure you communicate well with your spouse, which they don't. Or treat everyone equally. And I'm sure there are lots of things that we could learn as we think about that. But the problem with that, and there's two problems really, is, well, what if you're already grown up and you've got issues? That doesn't really help you. Or what if, I had amazing parents. My parents are incredible. If I could be half the parents that they were, I'd be pleased. But I still have issues. I'm still like Jacob, not just short and smooth and prefer the indoors, but I dress up to impress people. I'm like Rebecca. I'm pushy and I tend to micromanage. I try and change people. See, the thing is, the need for blessing doesn't come from bad parenting. It can make it worse, but it doesn't come from that. The moral of this story is not if you build great families, God will bless you. It's not, and if you build a bad family, God won't bless you. In fact, the story says, no, that's completely wrong. God commands his blessing here right in the middle of absolute dysfunction and disaster. In fact, he blesses the most dysfunctional member of this dysfunctional family. There is not, most characters in the Bible, they have their up moments and low moments. Jacob, it's all low. There is not one redeeming feature about him from human eyes. But God picks him because he wants us to know that he brings his scandalous, intervening grace in the lives of those who don't deserve it, who resist it, and don't appreciate it even once they've been saved by it. He says, and the thing is, Isaac finally gets it at the end. He says this, I ate just before you came, and I blessed him, and indeed, he will be blessed. See, Isaac, like many of us, has spent his whole life fighting grace, resisting the way of grace. See, before these boys were born, God has said, I am going to make my plans come through Jacob. In fact, basically saying, I'm going to pick the second one, the lesser one, the non-popular one, the one the world wouldn't choose. And at every turn, Isaac resisted that. And at every turn, he tried to prefer the stronger one, the handsome one, the more successful one, the more appealing one. But in this moment, it's kind of like he surrenders. He says, indeed, he will be blessed. Jacob does not deserve it, and yet he gets it. And that is grace. That is the grace that God offers you today. That God wants to know you, be close to you, and work through you. Jesus wants us to know this so deep down there. In one of his most famous stories, the story of the prodigal son, you may have come across it in Luke 15. Jesus basically takes this story and he retells it. The way he tells it is that there are two brothers, and a younger one goes to his father and says, I'd like my inheritance, I want the blessing. In other words, he's saying, I wish you were dead and on your deathbed like Isaac. And the scandal of Jesus' story is that the father goes, okay, and gives the inheritance to him. And then he goes off and he wastes it. And he ends up broken and ashamed in a pigsty. And eventually he thinks, I'll just go back home, see if I can get a job. And while he's still a long way off, the father sees him, runs to him, kisses him, puts his coat around him, and blesses him. See, in Jacob's story, it's the son that comes to the father. It's the son that kisses the father. It's the son that dresses up to come to the father. But in Jesus' story, it's the father who does everything. He runs to you. He kisses you. He clothes you, not to hide you, but to express his love for you. If Jesus can retell and redeem the story of Jacob, you can be absolutely sure that he can redeem and retell the story of you. You may have been spending your life dressing up, trying to earn God's blessing. You might have been dressing other people up, trying to make them acceptable. God says, come to me today, just as you are. He says, I have run to you. I am kissing you. I am pouring my blessing on you today. Amen. Why don't we stand? We're going to come and celebrate that fact by sharing in communion. And the symbolism of communion is so powerful because we come empty-handed and then we get given a sign of Jesus' work on the cross, his body, his blood. We are fed even by God's work. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that we can come to you with nothing. We come to you empty-handed and we get sent back with everything we need to know we are loved. Lord, as we celebrate now, remind us of your love. Remind us that you have commanded your blessing in the midst of everything that is going on in our lives in this moment. And Lord, by your Spirit, help us to understand and be grateful. Amen.